Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I will be running through my team selection ahead of Game Week 12, where I've got 4 free transfers, some big injury news to run you all through, and a bit of a decision to make on who I'm going to captain as well. Welcome back everyone to another video. If you did enjoy today's team selection video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like, but importantly, hit subscribe. We're under 100 subscribers away from 5,000. If I could get there before Christmas, that would be an amazing Christmas present. So thank you so much in advance if you're willing to do that. Let's move on to how my team is set up without any transfers ahead of Game Week 12. On paper, it doesn't actually look too bad. It's just the flagged players cause a bit of an issue. And then also when you consider the players that I don't have, that's where I start getting a little bit more worried as well. And I do have a bit of a saying in FPL, which is it's not about the players you don't have, it's about the players you do have. But I think there are exceptions to that rule. And this week in particular, there are a few players that I am missing out on right now that I would like to take advantage of my 4 free transfers and bring them in as quickly as possible, especially considering there are a few injured players in my ranks as well where I could make those moves. Let's start off in goal, where I do have a bit of a decision to make. I've got Pope starting against Man City at home at the moment, although he's been suffering with a concussion, obviously came off in Game Week 11. He's had a couple of weeks to get better again, and obviously the concussion protocol should be over by Game Week 12, but I will keep an eye on that. There is a decision to be made, though, as to whether I just start Dubravka regardless. He's probably got a slightly better fixture. Burnley at home aren't quite as poor as they are away from home, and Chelsea arguably could rotate a little bit. Obviously, I'll talk about that a little bit later on with my players ahead of what is a very busy fixture period for them with some very difficult games to come. So I'm quite tempted to actually just start Dubravka regardless, and then Pope can just sit on my bench, even if he does still have that concussion to deal with. Moving into the back line, I've got 4 at the back at the moment, although sadly it looks like Gabriel is going to need to be transferred out. More on him in a bit. Timber, I think, is absolutely fine. He would probably still be my second favourite Arsenal defender to have. So him at home to Spurs is good. The problem with him is I do wonder whether or not he's going to get rotated in one match during this quite busy period of fixtures. But I think he'll still start the majority. He'll still play 90 in the majority, and his underlying data is very strong as well. So I'm happy enough to keep him, knowing that I need to replace Gabriel anyway. So I still want exposure to the Arsenal defence. They are still a fantastic defence. Even without Gabriel, they'll keep clean sheets. Moving across, I am happy with both Senesi and Anderson, both with good home fixtures this week. If I had to maybe be forced into benching one of them, and that will be the scenario with some of the different transfer plans I've got, I think I'd probably bench Anderson before I benched Senesi. I think Senesi's upside just seems a little bit higher, and I do have a sneaky feeling that Sunderland give them a bit of a game, and I can see them scoring in that one. However, if I was to roll out with a 4-4-2 and start Anderson, I'd be absolutely happy with that as well. He's very easy to start ahead of what is a pretty good fixture for him. Moving into my midfield, got a couple more flags. I've got Enzo still flagged, although I expect him to start against Burnley away from home, given that he did have a rest during the international break. He wasn't called up by Argentina, and it looks likely that he will be fit for Game Week 12, unless we hear otherwise, of course. The problem with him is, given that Chelsea go up against Barcelona in the midweek after Burnley, followed by Arsenal in Game Week 13, and then it's 14 in the midweek, 15 on the weekend after. If he's going to get rested or rotated or get brought off early in any of the matches, this is probably the one where you'd expect it the most. So can I see him getting 60 to 70 minutes in this one? Yeah, absolutely I can. So one player that, although he has a good fixture, I am willing to sell this week if it's for another player with particularly high upside. We'll come on to that in a moment's time. Semenyo is still flagged, although I expect that flag to disappear after Iraola's press conference. He came back from international duty for personal reasons. There were rumours of an injury, but it looks like that he came back for his anniversary in particular, in which he went and proposed. So congratulations to the Semenyo family. Obviously great news for them. I think he'll probably be okay. It doesn't mean he's not injured, by the way. So we probably still want to wait and find out some more information there. But it looks more likely than not that this wasn't really an injury and he was just taken out of the squad for personal reasons. So I think he's going to be okay. And West Ham at home is a fantastic fixture. Saka, is definitely within the consideration set for captaincy this week for me. I'm very happy to own him against Tottenham at home. And Sarr away at Wolves, again, another player that I am genuinely very happy with. The problem is he hasn't been doing it in the Premier League recently, but he's been doing it in every other competition. The data is still good in the Premier League. I can only imagine that at some point soon, the returns are going to come in the Premier League. And I'm just crossing my fingers that comes before he goes off to AFCON and he does actually pay me back for the faith that I've shown in him. I think I've had him since game week 3 now, and I've only got a couple of returns from him in that time. Held him even through the injury and had him on wildcard as well. So I feel like if anyone owes me something, it is him. And fingers crossed he can finally get those returns against Wolves. The data is promising, so I am holding faith for now. Up top, I've got Erling Haaland. Of course, he's going to be a captaincy option away at Newcastle, and João Pedro away at Burnley as well. A little bit similar to Enzo in the sense that I can imagine maybe minutes being reduced in this game, so he is rested up and secure for the Barca game, then the Arsenal game after that. But it is still a decent fixture. So I don't want to just chuck away all my Chelsea assets with a really good fixture against Burnley just because I've got slight worries about minutes. But he is an option to maybe be looking at. I know he's not that popular to be bringing in right now with bad fixtures on the horizon. But this week, I could hold on to him. It's certainly possible that I take on the likes of Mateta, Thiago, Welbeck this week with João Pedro, because he does also have a good fixture. And I have actually been fairly well rewarded by holding on to him in the last couple of game weeks. He's picked up 16 points in the last 2 when a lot of people sold. So why am I rushing to sell him ahead of the easiest fixture of the lot? On my bench, I currently have Dubravka, but obviously we've talked about the discussion between him and Pope. Voltemada is on my bench against Man City. Can I see him getting something? Yeah, possibly. But I think given my starting 11, it makes sense to have him benched. And therefore, I am still thinking about using him as a make weight, maybe downgrading that position so I can make upgrades elsewhere with some of my 4 free transfers. Rodon and Longstaff on the bench at home to Aston Villa. I don't think they're awful options to be starting, but they're certainly the weakest of the players in my 15 right now. So no questions about that. Let's take a look at the captaincy matrix ahead of game week 12, because there is a real decision to be made this week. Okay, so those of you who have been watching my channel for a while will know that I do a weekly captaincy matrix where I basically score my predictions throughout the season. I pick from all of the different options, not just within my team. And so far this season, I've had a 9 out of 11 hit rate, so 81.8%. That's pretty good. And returns have on average been just north of 8 points per week without the captaincy to double it, of course. So again, not too bad, but it's mainly been Erling Haaland, so I can't really take much credit for it just yet. This week, I am going to back against him for the captaincy matrix, not necessarily in my own team because I don't have Salah. But I think if I did have both Salah and Haaland, this would be a week where I'd try and take on Erling Haaland. I think Salah, despite not being that prolific this season so far, the underlying attacking data is skewing upwards in the last few game weeks. He's looked a little bit more involved, and Nottingham Forest is a good fixture. He's on penalties. He'll get 90 minutes. I think if I had him, and it's easy for me to say because I don't have him and therefore I don't have this dilemma, but if I did have him, I think I would show faith and go with Salah ahead of Haaland. I don't think Newcastle away for Haaland is an impossible fixture for him to be getting a couple of returns in. But out of the two, I would very marginally prefer Salah. So Salah is my nomination in my captaincy matrix for this week. But in my own team, I don't have Salah. And I am ranking Haaland still as number 2 for me personally. I still think it's a decent fixture. They're without Dan Burn. Who knows what's going to happen with Nick Pope at the moment? And Newcastle have been struggling a little bit recently. Haaland is at his prolific best right now. City are funneling chances to him, and his expected goal involvement as part of the team is at about 60% of all team goal involvement right now in terms of the XG being created for Man City, which is absolutely ridiculous. So I still think I am going to be backing him ahead of the likes of Saka, who is my 3rd option right now. Maybe Bruno Fernandes, Mateta as well. All good options. And if you've got a good gut feeling on a Saka or a Bruno over Haaland, do not let me put you off. But given my position right now, and given the fact that Haaland is in the form he's in, and Newcastle haven't been that prolific, that brilliant either, I think I'm still going Haaland as my number 2 choice, and therefore will be captain in my team because I don't have Mo Salah. So I'm going with Salah in my matrix. So that will be what I'm scored on for this section next week. Fingers crossed Salah does really well and would be a very good differential captaincy shout if you've got him in your team. But I will be going with Erling Haaland because I don't have Salah. Okay, so a couple of days ago, I made a video on the latest injury news from during the international break. And at that point, Gabriel was a doubt going in to game week 12. And it looked quite likely he'd be out, but we didn't have anything concrete. Well, it's not official, I guess, but it kind of has changed with a very good source. David Ornstein usually tends to be on the money with these things. And he is suggesting that the early results of tests conclude that Gabriel could be out for 1 to 2 months. Of course, tests are ongoing. We don't have official confirmation from the club, but given David Ornstein has mentioned it, he tends to be fairly accurate on these things. So I think it's safe to assume that we're going to be without Gabriel for an extended amount of time. Now, that could be anywhere between 1 month, which would take us up to game week 17. So after we get those 5 free transfers because of AFCON, so that is quite crucial information. Or it could be as much as 2 months, which could lead him all the way through to game week 22-23 and into the new year, which is a very long layoff. With that in mind, I think he is a sell, even if he's out for only 1 month and 4-5 game weeks. Because we get those extra 5 free transfers in game week 16, that should be before Gabriel comes back, and therefore you can get back to him with those 5 free transfers fairly easily. So for me, he is unfortunately a sell. I've narrowed it down in my team to my 3 top options right now. They're all situational. Virgil van Dijk and Munoz would be the 50-50 call between the more expensive picks. Virgil van Dijk, I think, is slightly edging it for me right now, because I do love the fixtures, and I completely understand why a lot of people would not be that interested in Virgil van Dijk, but I've already got Arsenal coverage in Timber, so I don't necessarily feel that inclined to be picking up a Saliba or a Calafiori ahead of this run right now. And Timber seems to be doing the job as an Arsenal defender for me. And then outside of that, Palace are good options. So I am looking at Munoz, I'm looking at Lacroix. And because I don't have any Palace defenders right now, I am tempted to go there. But Virgil van Dijk's fixture run is much better for a much longer period of time than Palace are. And with Van Dijk in particular, you absolutely know he's going to be playing 90 minutes through this entire extended run. He's good on defcons. He's got attacking threat from set pieces. The next 2 fixtures against Forest and West Ham, they are very bad from defensive set plays. So Virgil van Dijk, you never know, could get an attacking return in one of those set pieces and in one of those games. So I still think Virgil is slightly ahead of Munoz for me, but Munoz is right up there as well. He's the much more fun pick, also in a good defense as well, do keep clean sheets, and of course has plenty more attacking upside. And it would be quite nice to have Munoz alongside Sarr, because I don't have Mateta. So at least I have 2 of the 3 most popular and most prolific Crystal Palace attackers if I did go with Munoz. So it is in my mind to maybe look at Munoz instead of Van Dijk. But I think if I went with a Palace defender, I'd be quite tempted to take the money down to someone like a Lacroix or maybe Gahey if he's fit. They are also good on defcon. They've got a bit of attacking threat themselves, although nowhere near as much as Munoz. But the money that I save from making that move instead can help me afford some pretty impressive things going into game week 12 with my other free transfers. So I think for me, it's either I go with Van Dijk and I can make moves elsewhere to make everything sweet, and we'll go into that in a moment, or I maybe take the money down to someone like Lacroix, and I would take it even further to Richards perhaps, if it wasn't for the fact that Gahey's probably back for game week 12 and Camvo also played really well in game week 11. So I can see Richards maybe missing a game. Possibly that's game week 14. Who knows? Pure speculation, and I might call this one completely wrong. But Lacroix, I would be very surprised if he misses a game. So that little bit more security for extra 0.5 million, especially because it also means I can afford other things, means that Lacroix, Gahey are well within my consideration. So let's take a look at the different transfer combinations that I'm looking at. There are some very complex ones, so I do apologize in advance, but hopefully the next section makes sense to you. Okay, so I do apologize if this section is a little bit more rambly than usual. I've never really had a game week where there are just so many different combinations of moves that I quite like, but none that really stand out as like my preferred route, considering I've got 4 free transfers and nothing in the bank as well, which I think is quite a crucial element to this. It does mean that I need to make at least 1 or 2 downgrades to make upgrades elsewhere. And therefore, there are a few different ways that I can make that money up to then bring players up in other positions. The other thing I should note is I don't have my free hit left. So I won't be free hitting in Game Week 13. I need to build a squad that can survive Game Week 13. I don't think it's going to be that difficult for me. I do like free hits in Game Week 13, but I can probably survive it with the 4 free transfers. Let's start off with option number 1, where I'd only use 3 of my 4 transfers. That would be to get rid of Gabriel, which will be a consistent factor in all of these. But in this particular scenario, I would take him down to Lacroix rather than taking him across to Virgil van Dijk. Now, by saving that money and also covering off the Crystal Palace defence, which I think is quite nice to do considering their ownership, in doing so, I've actually got the money to also downgrade Voltemada to Thiago, who I would actually weirdly bench this week, but gives me a stronger bench, and Thiago ahead of Burnley at home next game week. But by making those 2 sacrifices, which arguably aren't even sacrifices in the first place, I can take Enzo up to Bruno Fernandes. Now, Bruno Fernandes could also be in Burmo, but I think with Fernandes, for me, I'm slightly swaying towards him over in Burmo because it saves me a transfer later on. And with Fernandes, I just know that he's got so many different routes to points. I'd be surprised if he blanked more than 1 game week in a row, all the way through to game week 22. And that's exactly what I look for in an FPL asset. So I understand why some people would go for the more attacking option, but Mbeumo will be a transfer out soon, and the different routes to points are what makes Bruno Fernandes particularly appealing to me personally. But again, if you're looking at something similar, but you prefer Mbeumo, I have absolutely no qualms about that whatsoever. He's also a very, very good pick. So that's option number 1. I think option number 1 I actually prefer out of all of these right now, but let's have a look at the others because they're still in my mind. Option 2 would be using all 4 free transfers. So Voltemada would go down to Thiago, Gabriel would go to Virgil van Dijk this time, and this time João Pedro would also come out alongside Enzo Fernandez, so I'd be getting rid of both of my Chelsea assets, which might look a bit silly given that they are playing Burnley, but I do have doubts over expected minutes for this week. And to do that, I'd also upgrade Enzo to Fernandez, but I'd have to downgrade João Pedro to someone like a Danny Welbeck. Now, I really like Danny Welbeck, actually, considering the way the fixtures have fallen over the next period. I reckon he probably does start the next few, even though there is a midweek game in there. The spacing isn't too bad. The fixtures themselves are actually really nice. And he's been getting good minutes, great underlying data, and is on penalties. So I could get on board with this. And I think overall, this gives me a stronger 15. It gives me the Liverpool defence that I am keen for. Gives me two cheap strikers on penalties, and Bruno Fernandes, who I've already mentioned as well. So I do like this option. Option number 3 isn't too dissimilar, given the same 4 players come out. But instead of maybe spreading my funds more evenly between Thiago and Welbeck, I would be getting 1 more expensive striker, Mateta, and 1 cheaper striker, which is basically a dead spot in my team. That would be Mark Giu. Now, Giu obviously doesn't really play, so he would give me a weaker bench overall, and he'd be alongside Longstaff as well. So I'd have 2 pretty weak players on my bench week to week, and I'd be forced into a 4-4-2 most weeks. Whereas with option number 2, I could play a 3-4-3, I could play a 4-4-2. It does leave the options open for me a little bit. So I think option number 3 is only if I'm really desperate to have Mateta. And as much as I love him, because I've got Ismail Assar anyway, I do wonder if I could try and take him on for a couple of game weeks. Not to say he won't do well, I think he will, but Nketiah is coming back after the international break. I wonder if he starts eating into his minutes a little bit during what is a very busy period of the season, especially for Crystal Palace, considering they're also playing in Europe for the first time. So I do just wonder if maybe I can avoid him or survive him, I suppose. and go with someone like a Thiago instead, who probably won't do quite as well, but I don't think he'll be that far off at a cheaper price, and it makes other things affordable. So option number 3 is mainly if I'm really desperate for Mateta. Option number 4 would be if I think Enzo's minutes are going to be decent in game week 12. Where did I get game week 7 from? But game week 12, Enzo's minutes look good. I feel like he's definitely going to start and do really well against Burnley, which I do have a hunch he does. And also, if I wanted to change my system entirely. Now, these 4 moves, that would be Voltemada, Gabriel, Pedro, same as options 3 and 2. But instead of Enzo coming out, it would be Longstaff. Now, to also be able to afford Bruno Fernandes in this instance, I'd have to not only use Thiago instead of Mateta, but I'd also still have to downgrade that third striker from João Pedro all the way down to Mark Giu. Now, that would put me in a really strong 3-5-2 most weeks, because Longstaff is usually on my bench anyway, and my 5th midfielder would now actually be Bruno Fernandes. Very happy with that, but it would give me only 2 strikers, and the second striker would be quite a cheap one, the likes of Thiago, of course, not being that expensive, and it leaves me maybe a little bit inflexible. But I do also quite like this combination, because I think the midfield is probably where I see the next big hauls of points coming, and there are a lot of good, consistent midfielders for expected minutes. I do really want Bruno Fernandes, and to have him alongside Enzo, this game week in particular, does seem pretty strong. And then next week, I can get rid of Enzo for someone like Minter, and save myself even more money, with Brighton having good fixtures on the horizon too. Option number 1, I'll just go back to that one really quickly. Given that I only use 3 free transfers there, it does mean that next week I've got 2 free transfers, and I can still maybe shuffle Longstaff to Minter and downgrade João Pedro to Mark Giu in that game week instead. So it's kind of the same combinations of moves as option number 4, but in a different order. And it means that I can maybe stagger the moves slightly. In option number 1, again, Van Dijk probably doesn't come in all the way through to game week 14. So I do miss 2 good fixtures, but he would still be in my plan to bring him in later on down the line, probably game week 14. But it does mean I miss out for a couple of game weeks. Option number 5 is I just do the Gabriel to either Virgil van Dijk or Munoz and roll the other transfers to give me 4 free transfers in game week 13. And I can have this whole discussion, this whole dilemma all over again, albeit a little bit more simple, because Chelsea do play Arsenal. So it's 2 very easy sells on Enzo and Pedro, instead of maybe me sweating over them playing against Burnley this game week, where they could, of course, do really, really well. And I don't love the idea of getting rid of them, but I do have a hunch their expected minutes are going to be a little bit low. Right then, so I'm delighted to bring you a very exciting announcement, and one that you will only find on this channel, not with any other content creator or anywhere else on YouTube. FPL Focal has created a fantastic FPL app, and it's no exaggeration to say that I use this app more than probably any other football-related app during any given week, whether it's before a game week starts where I'm looking up clean sheet odds, goal scorer data, suspension tracking, the list goes on, or during a game week, especially where I'm constantly scrolling and refreshing to check out the live bonus points, the live DEFCON data, and importantly, what my live FPL rank is as well. This app truly does have it all. Now, Oscar, FPL Focal, has been very kind in giving me and my viewers exclusive access to the premium version of his app for a full free month. All you need to do is click the link in the description below to give yourself that option for the full free month. It starts from when you start as well. So this promotion runs all the way through November, but if you were to start it on the 20th of November, you get access all the way through to the 20th of December. And there are no obligations. You can cancel at any time, and you don't need to trade up to the full premium version afterwards. So give it a go. If you don't like it, then you can leave it alone and you won't ever pay a penny, and that is absolutely fine. Although I would be surprised if you don't get good value out of this one, because it is absolutely amazing. Props to him. He's created something genuinely fantastic, and I'm so honored that he's allowed me this exclusive offer that you genuinely won't find anywhere else. So thank you very much, Oscar. Hopefully you guys enjoy it too. Let me know how you get on with it in the comments below. and fingers crossed you do enjoy it as much as I do. Okay, let's wrap up by taking a look at what my preferred transfer combination at the moment would look like in my final 11 ahead of Game Week 12. Obviously unconfirmed, and as I'm sure you can tell, I'm far from decided or locked in at the moment because there are so many combinations that I can consider and loads that I haven't even been able to mention in this video because I didn't want it to run for an hour long. But I think my preferred combination is Lacroix, Fernandes, and Thiago right now, and maybe forgo Mateta. As much as that hurts me, I think I do quite like this combination. With that locked into my side, it would be Lacroix coming in place of Gabriel. Gives me Crystal Palace defence away at Wolves. I think that looks pretty solid. He's very good on the DEFCON, got a bit of attacking upside. Fernandes in my midfield is arguably even in the mix for captaincy this week, has a great record against Everton at home and great fixtures to come, and I never need to worry about his expected minutes. And Thiago right now would actually nestle on my bench as first sub, which feels a bit wrong considering I'm transferring him in, but the player that I'm replacing is Voltemada, who was on the bench anyway. It would give me a bit of a decision to make between Thiago and maybe Senesi Anderson as to who I would start. Right now, I've got my team in a 4-4-2, starting Senesi and Anderson, but I don't know. Does that feel right? Maybe I do actually bench Anderson and start Thiago and play a 3-4-3. I think that also works quite nicely. It's never nice benching a penalty taker with a half-decent fixture. So I do wonder whether that might be the play here. But right now, I am in a 4-4-2, and I will have a think about that if I do lock these moves in, whether or not Thiago should start ahead of Anderson or Senesi. Maybe let me know in the comments what you think as well. In the meantime, though, I think that looks pretty strong on paper ahead of Game Week 12. It gets me some players that I'm really happy to own for the long term, who I have no doubts over expected minutes on. Gives me 2 extra penalty takers in the likes of Fernandes and Thiago as well, so that's helpful going into the next period. And I think expected minutes are looking pretty solid across the board. It does mean that I use 3 of my 4 free transfers, gives me 0.2 in the bank, and next week I would probably plan on using 2 free transfers, as I am looking to be a bit more aggressive during this period up to the point where we've got the AFCON free transfers ahead of Game Week 16, because we need to use those transfers anyway. So I might as well be a bit more aggressive whilst I have the chance. I like the look of it. My captaincy armband is on Erling Haaland. I will think about Saka a little bit more, but I think I'm still currently on Haaland, and if I had to lock it in right now, it would probably stay that way as well. If you did enjoy today's team selection video, I'd massively appreciate it if you could leave a like, and importantly, please do hit that subscribe if you did enjoy the show, of course. We're so close to 5k. If I could get there soon, I would be forever grateful. In the meantime, remember, I've got a live stream on Friday evening where I'll be looking to try and lock in my side and answer all of your Game Week 12 questions as well. Do join in on that one if you get the chance. And if not, I'll see you next game week as we start preparing for Game Week 13.